If you want to learn more about effective management, head over to mattsingers.com and sign up for my free management training.
Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Matt. Thank you for asking me on the show.
Well, you're very welcome. And I'm very excited for today's episode because you have lots of amazing knowledge to share. And as we talked about previously going live, you're also working on a fantastic book. That sounds very, very exciting. So, Jan, I'm sure somewhere around the world, there's someone who doesn't yet know who you are. Would you mind doing a little bit of an introduction so they get to know you?
Of course. I am an entrepreneur from the UK. And as Matt has kindly introduced me, my name's Jan Cavelle. I have been an entrepreneur for a disgustingly long time, which has given me lots of experience, some successful and some very unsuccessful, some very small, some growth businesses. So a big mix of stuff I can share and delve into for you. And as Mads very kindly mentioned, I am currently just in the process of a final edit with my publisher of a book on scaling from 1 to 10 mil. That's the sort of British pounds, but it's not too far off for the American dollar either. That sort of big stage of big leap time in business that I've struggled with, and I know a lot of people who've been through it or have been through it or are in it. And it's a big challenge. So I wanted to write a book about that, and Bloomsbury are very kindly publishing it in April. So it will be out internationally for people to delve into then.
Excellent. That sounds super exciting. So from a management standpoint, right, you have obviously been through a lot, and you say sort of 1 to 10 million is sort of the ones where you have definitely seen a lot of challenges. So what is the most common challenge you see when people, they've gotten off the ground, they've built a business, they have a somewhat good monetization strategy, and they've managed to make about $1 million. What is the biggest challenge you see from getting from that and then scaling further up?
I think it's the biggest challenge is that you assume it will be similar to how it's been so far, and it isn't. You're talking about a completely different animal. In sort of up to the 1 million-ish mark for a start, you're very much in hands-on yourself, and your days and most of your nights are spent running circles enthusiastically around your business. But of course, you haven't got another 24 hours of you to go for the second million, and certainly not a third one of you to go for the third one. So you're much, much more reliant on other people, which means a whole new skill set. It means getting the right people in time, because if you were like me, you sort of drifted into it because the business grew, and finding the right people at the last minute is not the way to do it in an ideal world. And you can make a lot of mistakes choosing the right people. But without that right team, you're not going to be able to do it. So I think that's where the whole thing goes terribly wrong. More often than not, it's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, I talk typically about sort of 3 steps that entrepreneurs go through, right? So obviously the first challenge is finding a repeatable product that can actually scale and probably get up to, I look at it in people, but up to sort of 5 to 10 staff members, right? And typically that's the point where people can get to, even without having much management skills,
yes,
right? Because you can hire a few people, you can kind of run around in circles around them, and you can micromanage them, and you can manage to still build something that's making a little bit of money, right? But then the first big leap is getting from that point and then to the next stage, which is typically somewhere between 20 to 30 people,
Yeah.
right? Where, you know, you learn to rely on managers, but you're still very visible in the business. You're still a driving force, and, you know, everyone in the company still know you, and so on.
Yeah.
And that's typically the sort of second step. And then the third step that a lot of people bump into is then around, typically around 50 to 60 people, when they basically get so far away from the bottom of the organization, and, you know, they don't know the names of any of the new hires and things like that. And that's often a big problem, because often they've managed to put in place decent management to get to that point. However, this is where communication and very, very clear management structure is absolutely critical for future growth, right? So that's generally the clients that I've worked with, that's generally the 3 stages. And they usually have one of the 3 stages when they come to me, and there's, you know, hands up in the air and struggling. So, but that's really cool. That's really cool. And any particular golden nuggets in terms of finding the right people? Because I think in general, like all business owners, like, you know, the first couple of people you hire, it's always a lottery, because when you've never hired people before, you know, it is what it is. But, you know, after a while, when you start hiring people and eventually you're lucky enough to find some great talent, any particular lessons you have learned that you want to share? Any particular sort of tricks that you've learned that have really helped you from a recruitment standpoint or finding the right people?
I always struggled with it. I was in an industry with a massive skill shortage, which does not help. So avoid that if you possibly can. But to some extent, it goes back to what I was saying before about having plenty of time on your side, because if you're growing at a rate where you're firefighting, as so often happens, then, you know, you do hire almost who you can get, the best you can choose out of a bunch. And, you know, that is not going to be good enough to go the whole way up. You know, you want to, I mean, eventually I sort of did everything back to front. I went on some business courses very late in the day. And I learned sort of there that the sort of optimum was to actually look for somebody about a year before you need them, analyze sort of 6 months to look and 6 months to maybe settle them in. You know, whereas I was panicking and thinking I need somebody tomorrow because I can't cope. And that, of course, is a trap so many people fall into. So part of it is standing right back, having the time and the money to plan, to get the right people way ahead. So that's the first big one. And I think after that, it's the big debate of, are you looking for skills or are you looking for the right people? And the chances are that skills can be taught. But the right people, if somebody's the wrong person, they're always going to be a wrong person. And that can do so much damage to your business. You know, I think I mean, it's certainly what I find, and talking to other entrepreneurs since, you know, I hear this again and again, that one rotten apple can absolutely destroy a company.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's much a debate, to be honest with you. I mean, I typically say I take 80 and 90% less skill over 10% attitude, right? Yeah. In most cases. I mean, if you need a web developer or something, you definitely need someone with decent skill, right? Because you're not going to sit around 3 years, wait for them to learn how to build websites, right? Or the same if you need an engineer, some very, very specifically qualified people. But everything else being equal, right? Fundamentally, the mindset from my point of view is always about great people. And the way I look at it, I mean, I've come up to some big corporate organizations like Xerox and IBM where, you know, most of the recruitment comes from within. And I was really, really happy to experience that. And the businesses that I've built myself later, I've always followed that path, because here's the thing. When you hire people and put them at the bottom of your organization, if you don't learn to grow and develop them and they're stuck there, eventually they will run out of steam. Like some people are content with doing the same, but most people who are ambitious, who are actually like A-players, good people, they want to move forward. And the problem is if you don't develop them enough for them to do so, and you start recruiting people on top of them, you're basically going to lose great people. And second, when you hire, my experience and the way I look at it is, when you hire higher level people in the middle or even in the top of your organization, the potential risk you run with your business is significantly higher.
Yes.
So for example, if you hire a CEO to replace yourself, and for whatever reason that person doesn't work out, that is a huge risk. Whereas if you hire someone in the bottom somewhere of your organization where, they're doing something very basic, the risk is significantly smaller, right? Now, there's definitely also a big potential upside if you do manage to hire some great people with some great experience. But from a business building perspective, you often get, let's call it, significantly better deals if you hire people and grow them from within, right? But the most important thing is you know what to expect because you know the people. And you're actually building a trajectory where people within your organization can see, if I do good work, there's opportunities here.
I think that works, and it should work, providing you've got the right people to train up. And as you say, there's only a few that just don't want to. But if you are unlucky enough to have a lot of those, then you get a bit stuck, and you get sort of caught in a catch-22 of I don't want to bring anybody in because it's too dangerous, and the people would resent it. But on the other hand, these people aren't good enough, and they don't even want to do it. So you get stuck in the middle. So you really, really need to get those good, ambitious people who are dedicated to self-development as much as anything.
Yeah. And that's one of the fundamental pieces in my management framework is really around self-development, right? Because some people won't, and some people will never care to develop much, and that's the way it is. But you want your best people to be focused on personal development and consistently learning new skills. Honestly, even if it's not even relevant to your business, that's fine. But you want people with that mindset and attitude of developing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke to one entrepreneur recently that I've been sort of for different reasons from you, because of my writing, I get to speak to a lot of entrepreneurs. But he was saying that he's so obsessed with this that he actually looks and gives excess training to what they could possibly need and trains people the whole time, because he thinks that people tend to go outside with recruitment when suddenly they're short of a skill. Whereas if you keep training people on all sorts of things, whatever they happen to fancy, then the chances are you don't actually need to hire, because in the long run you save because you've got skill in house and you get rid of all that problem. Which is quite a thought. It can't always work, but I can see his argument for it. It's a lot safer.
One of the biggest problems is often along with training comes ownership and responsibility, right? And this is unfortunately where a lot of entrepreneurs sort of hit the ceiling, because a lot of entrepreneurs are very committed to their business and they're afraid to let go, right? And I see it so commonly when I start working with clients where they even if they've hired good people, they are afraid of letting go and giving them the ownership and responsibility. And it means fundamentally they end up doing stuff they shouldn't be doing in a million years because it's just not worth their time. And the challenge is when you do that, like people are like, oh yeah, but I'll just do it and so on. The problem is not just you doing it, but the problem is you actually inhibit the growth and development of your team and the people below you when you keep doing things that others should be doing, right? So, if you're an entrepreneur and you have been in your business less than 3 years, look at what you're doing in the business today. Everything you do a year from now should not be on your plate. So your biggest job right now is start making a plan of all the things that you're doing today and figuring out how over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, can you make sure someone else in your business end up doing those things, right? That's how you fundamentally grow a business, and that's how you hand off responsibility effectively, right? Because that is the only way for you to put yourself in a position to actually grow your business more.
It's very, very wise advice, Matt, and I couldn't agree more. As you say, from both sides, you make the employee actually feel very worthless if you do their smallest job for them all the time. And, if the only way you're going to grow is if you start systemizing and set things, up for anybody to be able to do them, because things happen. Even your best people could have a personal issue and leave, and your business has got to run in the long run, without you and without them on a day-to-day basis. So, systems is the way to go. But of course, a lot of entrepreneurs, because we're big picture, rush around, don't want to do all that tiny, mucky little boring paperwork stuff. We hate systems. And that's another thing I think people get into trouble with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm by nature a bit of a systems guy, but what I would say as an entrepreneur, you don't really have the time, and two, you shouldn't be spending the time building the systems necessarily yourself. So
No.
what I love to do nowadays is basically just record a video, explain to someone how to do something if needs be, and then let them do that task for a while. And then when they have done it, when they're relatively comfortable with that task, then I ask them to document the systems and the framework they're using, right?
That's a brilliant idea.
But one of the biggest issues that I see with all this advice online is that people are always telling the business owner, make the process, sit down, document the process, make sure they're up to date, right? No business owner in the right mind, no business owner have the time to sit and keep up to date 100+ processes and workflows, right? It is never going to happen. So the only way you can possibly keep your systems up to date is make sure that the people responsible for updating them is the people actually utilizing them on a day-to-day basis. Because when you give someone who's doing the task ownership of updating the workflows and the procedures, what happens is they feel ownership. They feel, hey, we can actually change things. Now, you might want a sign-off point, or you might want like either a manager or yourself, depending on the size of your organization, to say that change is okay. But even if you don't do that, you're actually significantly improving your business either way. But with a sign-off point, you can make sure that people don't end up doing things that is totally off the mark, right?
I absolutely agree, and I love the idea that you were saying of you videoing the original one. I mean, I can think of instantaneously a great friend of mine who's a business owner and does need, we've discussed often, needs to systemize, and doesn't have the time and certainly doesn't have the patience, but she would video, and it's never occurred to either of us. It's a really clever idea.
Yeah, and nowadays, particularly tools like Use Loom and so on, it's so easy to click a button and then literally show someone on a screen.
Absolutely. Well, unlike me, she's good technically anyway, so I shall suggest it to her.
Excellent. Sounds good. So definitely the people aspect is super important, Jan. Any other things that you really feel that these sort of around a million people maybe haven't yet figured out?
I think quite often people leave themselves off that list of people, and they don't think, I need to do work on myself. I certainly didn't think it because there wasn't time, which of course, is that old age one, no entrepreneur has time. But actually, you're going to have to really develop to go on up through those stages. You're going to have to develop yourself in so many ways with knowledge and self-care and all sorts of things. Just, keeping yourself level. It's such a roller coaster. You need to be very mentally strong And I don't think that's something that people factor in.
I totally agree. And I mean, it's one of my biggest blessings. So from a very, very young age, probably about 18, I started doing a lot of self-development, and I initially committed at least 2 hours a day.
Oh, brilliant.
Nowadays, I still do an average of an hour a day. But I literally used to read a book every single week for more than 10 years, right? So I went through a lot of content. I think it's the single most powerful way of developing, but it's also the single most powerful way for you to actually push yourself. Because one of the problems when you're an entrepreneur is you're used to 24 hours that you have,
Yes.
or at least many do, right? and here's the thing, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I've been there, and occasionally you can have a couple of days or a week or whatever, but generally you need to get out of that. If you work more in general, more than 8 hours a day, you are wasting your time. If you're working 12-hour days consistently, you could deliver at least the same or likely even more if you only worked 8 hours a day, right? I see it consistently, like how many hours people spend in front of the computer or spend working, but they're just not being effective because they're not rested. They're not making good decisions because they're tired. When they wake up in the morning, they're so tired from the previous day that they're not even ready to work. And it is super, super ineffective. Now, here's the thing. Even people like the American president, maybe not the current, but at least the previous one, spent time on a daily basis on personal development, right?
Yeah.
I can promise you, if the United States president can find the time to do so, I'm pretty sure most small entrepreneurs can find the time too. So again, so many people talk about time management, but the secret is you can't manage time, right? Like there's definitely some things you can learn to be a little bit more effective with, but the fundamentals should not be trying to do more in less time that most people are running around after. The focus when you're an entrepreneur are you doing the right things with the time you have, right? And personal development or personal growth is the number one most important if you want to develop a business long term, because who you are today, if you have $1 million business today or £1 million business today, who you are today is not going to be the same person who's going to build $100 million business. It's not. The difference is what you learn and how much you grow. And the more time you invest into growing yourself, the faster you will likely get to those higher levels, right?
So wise, Matt. Yeah, absolutely agree with you.
But that's a great point, and I love it. What any particular things that you have learned yourself, or any particular sort of either methods or any particular resources or anything that you've found super, super valuable yourself?
I loved learning from other entrepreneur groups. I had to find the right ones. But when I joined the high growth one, which is where we were at, which I had to go to London for, and they were way, way bigger and more advanced than I was, 99% of them. But I learned so much, just even from, sort of both. I went on a formal course there, but I also went to dinners. There were informal dinners all the time, and just sitting around sharing problems and thinking, oh, you've been there, okay, and what did you do? And it just makes such a lot of difference. You don't feel so isolated. You don't feel quite such an idiot. You don't, and you get so many ideas. I loved what you say on your website that, you're a great believer in learning from somebody who's actually walk. And I couldn't agree more. I'm not pro. Occasionally I got people coming in who wanted to teach me because they'd been taught or but they'd never had a business, and it just didn't do it for me. What I learned from other entrepreneurs or people who'd at least had a businesses of their own, it just gives 10 times over the worth. Always.
Yeah, and I find that very. I mean, I think as an entrepreneur, you need to surround yourself with like-minded people, right? Because so many make the mistakes of, constantly sharing with their partner or their family, and people who doesn't understand the entrepreneurial
Exactly.
world at all.
Yeah.
And often, more often than not, I would say it ends up in negative situations instead of positive. So rather than getting help, you're often either getting the wrong advice, and not because people don't want you the best, but exactly because people want you the best. So if we call it normal people, they always try and mitigate risk, right? They always
Yeah.
try and remove risk, take as little risk as possible, and so on and so forth. And if you're an entrepreneur, that is generally not what you're doing.
No.
You are taking risk. And part of becoming successful is take risks that, brings you some big rewards. And that's how fundamentally you build a business. But if you're consistently surrounded by people who are not entrepreneurs, who doesn't understand that world, again, you're very likely to get, negatively impacted from that in terms of both your mindset, but also the advice you get. And I think really exactly as you say, like, finding like-minded people that you can meet with on a regular basis. And honestly, even if you don't even share your problems, even if you're just listening to them and, talking about your situation, like just talking with people about your situation can be so helpful, because very, very often we have all the solutions in our head, right? Very, very often, even just explaining a problem you have to someone else makes it so logical what you should do. But when you're just sitting thinking it, you're not getting it, right?
Absolutely right. And I think the other thing is it gets you out of the business. It's so much easier to have that brainstorm, when you're sitting over a meal or whatever, somewhere totally different. But it is when you're in your office and half your view is listening to what's going on in the next office or on the shop floor or wherever, and you're just distracted and you're tense and you're just not in a receptive mood to actually use your brain in a creative way.
Yeah. And I mean, me personally, growing my businesses, the single most important thing I've done is helping other people, right? Fundamentally, and I'm a big fan of Zig Ziglar's old quote, but fundamentally for me, the more people you help, the better you will do. And it's both a match of, the good old saying that the best way to learn is to teach. So again, if you have a challenge, or even if one of your entrepreneurial friends have a challenge, it's often a lot easier to look at something from the outside and give great advice than necessarily to take that advice yourself.
Yes.
But the thing is, when you give that advice and when you look at the situation, it becomes much, much clearer to you what the right choice of action is. And that actually means it makes you more likely to take the right choice of action next time you're in a similar situation, right? So, and I'll be honest, like even being a business coach, like I have just as many problems as everyone else have, right? I hopefully deal with many of them slightly better, but in the end of the day, every business owner have certain struggles. Every business owner have certain problems, and that's not going to change, because we're all working with human beings. We're all working with clients who are human beings and suppliers who are human beings and all that sort of thing. And as long as human beings are involved, there will always be things not always going as expected, right?
Absolutely.
The key thing is really how you show up and how you deal with it and how you communicate around that.
And I couldn't agree more. And that goes back in part to looking after yourself, developing yourself, and getting that support system in place that you're in a fit state to do that. Yeah. And I was. It took me a long time to understand that. Far too late, really. It was probably my biggest mistake in not being hot on that.
Yeah. And where did you find the best places to network with people? Like locally where you were?
I didn't. I must admit, I didn't have. I was sort of in a country town where I mean, there were some quite big businesses, but some of them were sort of local subsidiaries of huge concerns, which, as a tiny entrepreneur's business or a small entrepreneur's business with sort of 30, 40 staff, I didn't have really anything in common with them. Or they were family businesses. Again, they were quite happy where they were. I couldn't find anything that I related to locally. I had to go to London. And I was very lucky to be invited to join a high growth club there, where I met some just brilliant entrepreneurs, and who are some of the biggest and best in Britain, and I learned so much from them.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like a good experience. I mean, I've always been an advocate of networking and anywhere all the time, right? I'm very keen though. I very rarely carry business cards with me, because when you walk in the door and people start throwing business cards at you, that's definitely one thing that can make me turn around. But
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, most people totally miss the point of networking, and it's absolutely not firing business cards at other people, right? That does not bring you anything good whatsoever. I actually have the opposite. So even if I have a business card on me and someone asks, I'll make it more difficult for them to make sure they actually utilize the information, right? Because most of the time what happens is a business card goes in someone's pocket or purse, and then, sometime 6 months later, they throw it out because they can't even remember what it was from. And yeah, it doesn't work, right? So the fundamentals is going out, meeting like-minded people. And for me, it's the absolutely number one recruitment strategy that I've always employed is find amazing people around you. Because when you network, when you meet a lot of human beings, you will find amazing human beings. And the thing is, when you find great people, when you find people with the right mindset, the right attitude, and the fact that you find them in a non-interview situation only makes it so much better, right? Because they're not necessarily at that point in time looking to be hired. They're not looking to look for a job, but the amount of people that I've met face to face at various events or whatever, and then at some point in my career offered a job, that's a lot of people, right? And
that must be lovely.
Yeah.
Really nice. I mean, I think that, it's a rare problem, but one of the problems I had, and it may hit sort of ring bells with somebody out there, is geographic. I was in an area that was not highly entrepreneurial, to put it mildly. That's saying the nice things about it. And I mean, you just didn't have the recruitment pull there to get good people. They didn't exist really, and it wasn't a place that you could attract people to either. So, it was no use going to London and saying, there's this great, lovely place in the country, because they would come down and say, you've got to, or even worse, I've heard of that, so 5 people got stabbed last week. Well, curiously enough, it's not where you want to move your wife and children to,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the benefits with COVID, I think now, is that we'll see a lot more companies sort of going online and a lot more communication happen online. Obviously not necessarily the same thing as sitting next to someone, but again, particularly for companies that are in difficult locations and small businesses, right? I mean, it definitely opens up a lot more possibilities, right? And I was lucky from an early age, I would say, when I started working corporately, particularly IBM. I mean, they were, they had staff all around the world, and they were very, very good at utilizing, the sort of cost-effective labor at where it made sense. And I definitely learned a lot from that, and I've benefited a lot from that in the businesses that I've built, because, sometimes, for example, hiring someone in South Africa who is native English speaker, is maybe half the price of what's hiring them in the UK. Now they are in the same time zone. They might be, equally well skilled and so on, and also often significantly more appreciative of the work and the job. So very, very often, I mean, learning to look at the whole world when you look at workforce, and it's not simple and it's not easy, but there is a lot of opportunity out there to do things nowadays that people didn't look at 15, 20 years ago, right? And
Yeah.
definitely some opportunity to at least for some things get significantly more cost-effective labor involved, where that actually enables your business growth, right?
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, there's a proven track record of amazingly successful businesses starting in bad times. So there will be people who will get bigger and have come up with amazing, innovative ideas, and have fabulously successful businesses through this.
Definitely. And I'd say at the moment, so we have hired quite a bit, and a lot of the people that I know that have hired a lot here through the Corona situation have really benefited big time from the website called dynamitejobs.com, which is basically a remote work website where people all over the world is looking for a remote job. But that's a really, really interesting website because they are very, very good at getting some solid candidates. And particularly if you're maybe on the edge, kind of like you don't feel you can afford to hire someone maybe in the UK, well, very often on this job board, they'll have maybe candidates from Eastern Europe or candidates from elsewhere that, at a different salary bracket, but, still smart people. And again, if you hire well, you can find a ton of value in different places. So
I bet. Sort of because I was manufacturing in Britain, that option wasn't necessarily there, but I don't think many people will be setting up to do that at the moment. So not the sector to be in. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the talent to be able to pull on a global pool, which is not easy to say, is a fantastic opportunity for businesses now.
Yeah. Fantastic, Jan. Any other amazing resources or books or anything you have that you would recommend to people here before we finish up?
I mean, I'm absolutely with you about reading. I think, I'm lucky because I love it being a book person, but, there are just never-ending amounts of brilliant books written. And if you really want to read podcasts like yours, and a few others, have so much information there, and you can multitask and take in so much information and again relate to it and have light bulb moments and make that part of your self-development, however pushed you are. It's all part of that story of self-developing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Jan.
A pleasure.
It was definitely a pleasure to have you on, and I'll make sure that we include a link to your book as well when it comes out. And then, what's the best way if people are eager to contact you? What's the best way to do so?
Through the website, please, which is jancavelle.co.uk.
Fantastic. I'll make sure we include that in the show notes as well.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.